This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information.
Yeah, I mean, there's basically, I had two options. So, as you said, I think if you live basically for 5 years in Mexico, you get citizenship. Or if you marry a Mexican, after being married for 2 years to a Mexican, you get a citizenship. So either way, 2 years married or 5 years living here.
Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Hrvoje Moric, host of the Geopolitics and Empire podcast and TNT Radio. Hrvoje, how's it going, man?
Excelente. ¿Qué onda, vatos?
And where are you calling in from if that wasn't enough of a hint?
It's already an open secret. I am in Guadalajara, Mexico, the second biggest city, right, in Mexico.
Awesome. And I am based in Mexico as well. In fact, I'm drinking a michelada as we record. So cheers to you, sir.
I'm having some organic Mexican wine. I think the brand is Adobe. So there you go. Cheers.
Ooh, there you go. So I guess to kick things off, I've worth mentioning, I've been a guest before on, was it the TNT Radio that I was a guest on?
TNT Radio. And funnily enough, I just got off the line with James Guzman of Borderless. Last hour, he was my guest. And you were with him together on my TNT show last year. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was on twice. Once as a solo guest, and then another time James and I together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And James is a previous podcast guest at the My Latin Life podcast, just for some continuity, so people can go look up the episode with James Guzman. He's a huge OG in the whole internationalization space and sort of international migration space. Borderless podcast is James's show that you guys can look up. So maybe that's a good place to start. Hrvoje, maybe you could tell us, like, how long have you kind of been in this space, and how did you get your start, and who were your early influences?
Yeah, well, I mean, I came to Mexico in 2010, so I think I met James like 2014 or 16. I went out to San Miguel to meet him, and yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start. I mean, I'm from the U.S., but I decided to permanently expatriate in 2006 because I learned all about the American Empire, and I wanted to travel the world and learn languages and learn about other cultures. Very sort of like nomad, worldly. And I'm a Croatian, and Croatians are very nomadic. And I got my many cousins are all around the planet. I've got cousins in Vietnam, some that were previously in Russia and Turkey and Germany and so forth. And so, so I went off to Mongolia, did Peace Corps, and then did my graduate in Switzerland, Geneva. And then after Geneva, I'm like, the world is my oyster. And I just love remote places. I was applying for jobs or going to apply or applying in Alaska, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Mongolia. And then finally, I ended up being offered this gig in Guadalajara at the Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is like the MIT of Mexico, where all the wealthy send their kids. It's a high school and university system. And then, 2010 is when I started, came down to Mexico. And I thought, 1 year, 2 years, kind of what you talk about, my Latin life, pretty women, Latin women, the weather, the food is great. Who doesn't want to learn Spanish? 1 year turns into 2, turns into marrying, having kids, buying a home in Mexico. 2018, I became a proud Mexican citizen, and I take my citizenship seriously. It's no light thing. I know Mexican history probably better than most Mexicans, being a former history teacher at the Tec de Monterrey. And yeah, it's my third passport: U.S. passport, Croatian passport, EU citizen. EU citizen. Unfortunately, I'm totally not a fan of the European Union, and now a Mexican citizen. So, yeah, I don't know what else I can tell you.
There you go, guys. How does it feel to be a triple citizen?
It's great. I mean, and along the lines of what you do, like I've had on my podcast Doug Casey, the international man, Matt Smith, who works with him. They're both down in Uruguay, and that's always been my intuitive philosophy. It just makes sense. And myself being a Christian, I mean, some people will be shocked. I forget which part of the Bible it's like. I don't know if it's the Old Testament or Proverbs, but it actually says, I mean, it's shocking. You can go and check it, to spread your wealth across multiple jurisdictions or geographies. Basically, the Bible teaches you to be a permanent, what do you call it, PT, permanent tourist, or um, uh,
Hmm.
because you never know what's going to happen in one geographic location. And so it's just I've just always found it intuitive, and um, so yeah, I've just been sort of floating around the planet and having three passports. I mean, it helps. I like becoming a Mexican because just less paperwork in many instances. Like when every time you exit Mexico, go to the U.S., or you got to fill out those immigration forms, and now it's just like, no, here's my two passports, and that's it. Or when I was fleeing Kazakhstan in 2020 during the COVID incident, um, first of all, it was very difficult to leave Kazakhstan because everything was shut down. And then it took me 5 days to get back to Mexico. And we had to go, we took this emergency flight route for internationals, and it was through Amsterdam. Now, get this, my family, they're not yet Croatian citizens because I haven't done the paperwork for them. But when we landed in Amsterdam, they were like, third country nationals couldn't go through the EU. And I had booked the hotel for the night at the Amsterdam airport. And the security, like, they put us to the side, and I'm waiting for 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm like, wait a minute, I read the rules. Like, I thought they were just having us wait, but I think they thought I was not a European. And I went back up to angrily to the security, and I'm like, I'm a European, I'm a Croatian. Why am I waiting here? And they're like, oh, okay, go ahead. And because my family, um, because I was a Croatian EU citizen, they were allowed, no questions, to go with me. So again, that was a perfect example of how having a second or third passport
Hmm.
allowed us to escape Kazakhstan through Europe back to Mexico, where otherwise we would have been in a tight spot. So any extra passport that you can get or permanent residency is very valuable.
And there's you've mentioned so many things. It's almost like, what should I touch upon? You're giving me the whole candy store, but I guess maybe the audience would just like to get a better picture of you. So it sounds like you've been a professor or teacher for many years, the better part of a decade. What has been sort of your professional trajectory? I guess in the professional working world at large, and as a teacher.
Yeah, I studied education and history, my undergrad in Illinois, northeastern Illinois. It's a teachers college, not big, no, not so big like Northwestern. And so I'm a teacher by trade, and yeah, I'm very conspiratorially minded, just so people know. But yeah, and so been a teacher, and so I taught English. I was an English language volunteer in Peace Corps out in Mongolia, and then when I came back, I wanted to study. So I studied history, my undergrad, and then my master's was in international relations at the Geneva School of Diplomacy in Geneva. And there, I was also an intern or staff assistant at the UN and EU. And some of my professors included, Dutch American international human rights lawyer Curtis Dobler, who was Saddam Hussein's defense lawyer, or I had as a professor Ibrahim Sous, who was Yasser Arafat's brother-in-law. The Palestinian
Wow.
Liberation Organization, and other fancy people. Alfred Zayas, professor of mine, he's been on my podcast a number of times. He's great grandson of Cuba's president and UN special rapporteur. He's often on Russia Today and places like this. And so Yeah, and then I taught, as I said, in Mexico at the Tec de Monterrey. I taught high school, secondary education, and I was an international relations adjunct professor at the Tech.
Okay. Okay. And the Tech Monterey, because we keep mentioning it, it's a combined high school and university, and they have several campuses, right?
They got about 30 campuses all over Mexico. They're like one of the top universities in all of Latin America. And in fact, a friend of mine sent me an email a couple, like 2 weeks ago, because you had the World Economic Forum Davos, and they were the only. So the Tech, they're very proud. They shot out an email saying the Tec de Monterrey of Mexico was the only university in all of Latin America to officially be invited to the World Economic Forum. And I know when I taught there probably 10 years ago, Al Gore visited our campus in Campus Guadalajara, Tec de Monterrey. And, during the pandemic, because a lot of classes were online, they had Bill Gates and Hillary Clinton speak at the online graduation ceremonies at the Tec de Monterrey. So that just sort of tells you how important the Tec de Monterrey is. And again, like I said, the wealthy of Mexico, half of the
Hmm.
students have like scholarships, partial or full, and then the other half are like ultra wealthy. I had students who, one student when she graduated at age 18 from the high school, the prepa, her dad bought her a military Hummer. She was driving around. Other kids' dads picked them up in like Lamborghinis. Some of them have like private, jets, and so yeah, that's how it is at the Tec de Monterrey.
And I'm just curious, how did you go from the Geneva School of Diplomacy in Switzerland to Mexico and teaching at the Tec de Monterrey?
Well, like I said, my background was history, and so I was applying for jobs like at the Red Cross and all also and teaching and whatever I could get. And then the director of the prepa at Campus Guadalajara, Tec de Monterrey, he happened to be Scottish, and so like I said, I sent in my CV and I got hired. So, it helps because I had the background in Geneva and
Hmm.
interesting experiences, and that helps as a teacher. And so yeah, they hired me, and then I was there for until 2017. I was kind of getting tired of Mexico, and I put out my CVs in different places, and I got hired to go to Kazakhstan.
That's a big change from Mexico to Kazakhstan.
Oh man, I mean, especially well, I lived previously in. I fell in love with Central Asia. One of the things was there was a great documentary called. This documentary was actually produced by two Croatian brothers. It's called Genghis Blues, and it followed this blind blues musician called Paul Pena from San Francisco, who he fell in love with throat singing. It's called humi, which is native to the Central Asian region.
Hmm.
Tuva, so Tanu Tuva, which is right next to Mongolia. It's basically the same culture, and they sing like two or three or four different tones, you know, at the same time. And so when I watched that, I was like, I fell in love with Central Asia. Genghis Khan, the Mongols, and it's the country with the lowest population density. And I just love being in the middle of nowhere. And so that's why I went to Mongolia. I lived in the little town in the southern part of Mongolia, Gobi. Literally, it was like less than 1,000 people in the village, and you're literally in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of kilometers away from civilization, and minus 30, minus 40 Celsius. And so when I did Kazakhstan, and usually around February, it got so cold, the schools closed for a week because it's like minus 30, minus 40, minus 50. So fun times.
Is that the Gobi Desert, or am I mistaken?
Well, in Mongolia, yeah, it's the Gobi Desert in where I was in Mongolia, and then to the way to the to the west where I was in Kazakhstan. I was the northern tip of Kazakhstan actually, which is like close to the southern tip of Siberia. By the way, Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, which is Ulan means red, Batar means hero. It's the city of the red hero. You know, harken back to the communist times, and in I was living in Semey in Kazakhstan, which is used to be called Semipalatinsk. That's where they sent all the dissidents. So Dostoevsky was sent to Semey, where I lived for I
Hmm.
think like 5 years. I visited his whole old home in Semey, and 120 kilometers from Semey, where I was living in Kazakhstan, um, was the polygon. That was the principal Soviet nuclear test site. 18,000 square kilometers. And from 1949 to 1990, the Soviets dropped 500 plus nukes on the polygon, above ground. And then after like the nuclear test ban treaty in the early 1960s, they couldn't do above ground tests anymore. They had to do underground tests. And so I actually went to visit the polygon part of it, and I visited one of the ground zeros, where one of the nukes actually dropped. So yeah, quite fascinating experience.
I have a random question, and I know we're going to bounce a lot in this episode, but you grew up in the United States. You were born in the United States, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I was born in Chicago, so I'm a Chicagoan, Windy City, and again, my parents are immigrants, so they left Yugoslavia in the 80s. Uh,
Hmm.
they met separately, so they both left. My father's from Dalmatia, so I'm a Dalmatian. So he's from the southern coast of Croatia. So it's funny though in Spanish though, because many times you'll just translate like the same word, Dalmatian, and in Spanish you'll say like Dalmata, but apparently dalmata is an insult. And I insulted myself. I was with some of my wife's family, and I'm like, I'm a dalmata in Spanish. And he goes, yo soy una dalmata. And they all started laughing because to call someone a dalmata is like an insult because that's also a dog. But in
Hmm.
English, when you say I'm a Dalmatian, you come from the Dalmatian area of Croatia. So a lot of that's how you learn the language too. Don't be afraid to make fun of yourself, or you know, that's how you learn. And yeah, my mother's from the north, and so anyways, they met in Chicago. I was born, and then I think every single year, back in the '80s, they would send me alone as a kid to Yugoslavia. At the time, it's Yugoslavia, but Croatia for 3 months, 4 months, long stretches of time. So we went every single year pretty much. And then when I was in fifth grade, it was like 1994, the war was still going. And we moved back for like a year to Split, Spalato in Italian. And the Serbs had not gotten as far as Split. So it wasn't like I was living with, bombs every night. And then we moved back. And then I went to high school again in Croatia, 1997, I think. And then I moved back to the States. And so it's sort of like a back and forth.
Okay, gotcha. Because I kind of just noticed that you talk about Croatia a lot and you identify with Croatia a lot for someone that wasn't born there. I know you have the passport, but I was kind of just curious to unpack that a little bit.
Well, no, because my name, Hrvoje, means Croat or Croatian. Because in Croatia and Croatian is Hrvatska. So the root
Hmm.
Hrvatska, Hrvoje. I speak fluent Croatian. And like I said, I traveled every year, speak the language. It's my culture. I kind of liken it to a Mexican who's born in the U.S. Maybe their parents are born in Mexico, and then the kid is born in U.S. They speak fluent Spanish along with English. They eat Mexican food. They listen to Mexican music. You know, um, you get what I'm saying. And then is that person American or Mexican? For me, it's like no, you're Mexican. I'm Croatian, and I identify more as a Croatian than an American.
Hmm. And the school in Geneva, the Geneva School of Diplomacy in Switzerland. So that's where you got your graduate degree.
Yeah, I got my Master's of International Relations at GSD, as we call it. Actually, the year that I graduated, it's a funny story. This kind of links to my future. 2000. It's a relatively new school. It was born, or it's a private university founded in the early 2000s by Colum de Sales Murphy, an Irishman who worked in the UN. He's the president of the school. And 2009, I graduated. And every year they invite, like, they give honorary degrees or diplomas to interesting people. Actually, one of my classmates, his father was China's ambassador to the UN. So again, a lot of a fascinating time. And Mikhail Gorbachev, was invited to my graduation ceremony, but because of his age at the time, he couldn't make it. And so I think his right hand man, who you see with Gorbachev and all of those photos with historic photos of Bush and all these people, I think it's Pavel, if I'm not mistaken. He came in the Gorbachev's stead, and by a twist of fate, in 20, I think it was 2017, spring of 2017, I ended up going for 3 weeks to Russia. There's a lady called Sharon Tennyson. She's got an NGO called Citizen Center for Citizens Initiatives, and she's been doing this since the 80s, like trying to promote peace between Russia and the U.S. And she organizes these trips, and like 30 of us Americans went to Russia. We met with Gorbachev for two hours. I shook his hand. We met other, Vladimir Posner is very famous in Russia. He had his own primetime show in the U.S. with, I think, Tom Brokaw in the 1970s, and so I got to meet Gorbachev 8 years later. Since he couldn't make it to my graduation, I met him in Moscow. So
And did you tell him why'd you miss my graduation?
no, well, yeah, I had a brief moment with him, and so I just told him like, oh, I graduated from GSD, and he's like, oh, it's a great school. Yeah, I know. So
That's very cool. How does like a Croatian American make his way to the Geneva School of Diplomacy? Like you did the Peace Corps, which we haven't really talked about. Um, but yeah, and we've talked about how you've always had an interest in history, but there must have been a decision making process that led you up to that.
well, it's like what happened in 2000s. I just everyone falls in love with some particular subject, right? And I just loved history, and as I like I said, I'm a Christian. I love the Bible and prophecy. So for me, those all come together. Biblical prophecy, history, and then political science or international relations. And so uh, it just turned out that at that moment, Geneva was the best option because it was a 1 year program. And then I was looking at other stuff like the Colorado, I think Boulder. Um, they had a 2 year Masters of International Relations, and each year was like 30 grand. And the Geneva school was like also like 30 grand a year, but they gave us a partial scholarship. And so it's like, why waste 2 years when I can do the same thing in 1 year at half the price? It just made total sense. And Geneva is the heart of, you know, the global power structure. You've got all of the IGOs, international government organizations, NGOs, everything is there in Geneva. And um, yeah, so I did have a Serbian American classmate, and I would hang out at the Croatian mission to the UN out there in Geneva. I'd go down there, and so yeah.
Yeah, we have an episode, episode 50, with someone that graduated from like the UN School of Diplomacy or Global Affairs, I think it's called, also in Geneva. I'm not sure if the schools have any sort of relationship. They just sound so similar.
Yeah,
With Felipe May, maybe you know him. He's like kind of in the immigration investment space, but he went to the like it's like a UN school sponsored by the United Nations, and they sort of train people up to be ambassadors and members of consulates and stuff.
yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I know you've got like the Geneva. Well, people mix up Geneva School of Diplomacy. You've got Webster University. They've got a campus out there, and then you've got like the Geneva Graduate School, which
Mhm.
is like Swiss, and so that's separate. I know the UN University is in Costa Rica. I had a great time. I went to Costa Rica, I think 2016. I didn't have time to stop and visit the UN University in Costa Rica, but um, yeah, I'm just not familiar with that UN University in Geneva.
Fair enough. Just a aside, I wanted to see if there was a little bit of a connection there because I feel like I've been going so deep on all this stuff. I almost want to legitimize it in some way by maybe studying in Geneva or something like that. I think it'd be cool. Like if you have European citizenship, I bet it's quite a bit easier and cheaper to study there.
Cheaper, I'm not. Well, I'm not sure about the cheaper. I mean, it was a blast. I had the time of my life in Geneva, meeting so many fantastic people. Uh, it's expensive though, and I mean, just to compare, when I was there, and so I studied with my sister. So my sister and I both studied that same master's, and it was cheaper, for our father plus the scholarship to pay. because we just he paid for one apartment, right? And the
Mm.
price of the at the time, so this is what, like 15, almost like 15, 14 years ago. So one little apartment, it was like one bedroom plus the living room, kind of like two bedroom, but a tiny apartment. I think it was like 1,800 francs a month. That's like, let's say equivalent to $1,800 a month, which is pretty crazy. And then, I mean, when I first came to Mexico in 2010, like a year later, I was paying for a two-bedroom, small home, like $250 a month, compared to almost 2 grand a month in Switzerland. So it's very expensive. And then usually people in international relations, when they graduate, you have to intern like for 6 months or a year or more before you find a paying gig. Hoping you find a job at the UN or some international organization or some government or some NGO.
Hmm.
And so you have to be able to sponsor yourself for like a year, paying rent and food and everything. And I'm like, I can't. My dad can't do that, and so I had to hightail it out of there. As well, I heard stories about, especially from the female side, people would do unruly things, to try to get jobs. And I know people who did, you know, um,
Like a
I
fake marriage or something.
well, no, not fake marriage, but sleeping around or whatever to get jobs, that sort of thing. And so it's a tough spot. So, but yeah,
Jeez. I mean,
uh,
any good university is in an expensive city. You want to go to Harvard, it's in Boston, stuff like
yeah.
that. So it's whatever. Okay. I'm not sure if I want to ask you about Mexico and Guadalajara and how you chose Guadalajara, or I want to ask you about kind of just like how you got started with TNT Radio and the Geopolitics and Empire podcast. Um, I'll give you the choice. What would you be more excited to talk about?
Well, I mean, like the podcast is sort of my passion, and so it was like 2012 basically, and I started teaching. And I never wanted. I'm more introverted by nature, but at this point, I'm pretty extroverted. But um, I just couldn't find intelligent people around me to talk about these things like at depth. Whether it's war, all these different wars that are going on, Syria, Libya, all these things that are going around the world. Even the people in my field, like the other teachers around me, like, that are teaching history and political science, everyone was just sort of um, like just show up to work, do the minimum, and then leave, like lowest common denominator. And I eschew that sort of behavior. I think everyone, I mean, if you're going to do something, be passionate about it. And I'm like, don't, if you're going to be a history teacher, be a history teacher, go above and beyond. Or if you're going to do podcasts or whatever you do. And I was getting, I think it's a shame. When I was a teacher, I was doing gamification. I was constantly pushing the envelope. And I just would look with disdain at colleagues who just, I even had one director, a Mexican department director, come to me and say, you need to chill out. You're making the other teachers look bad. It was like the crab mentality, where the crab pulls you down, where you're one crab trying to get out of the bucket, and then the other crabs pull you down. Like
Hmm.
I couldn't believe where they were actually telling me, like, you're doing too many things. You're doing too good. Your work. You need to be worse because you're making all the other lazy people look bad. And so I ended up 2012. I'm like, I want to talk to these smart people. How do I get to talk to them? Maybe I Skype them into my classroom and then throw that up on YouTube. So I started Skyping in, like Dr. Paul Craig Roberts was well known. He worked with Ronald Reagan, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. Ray McGovern, former CIA officer whose job was to brief 7 presidents, the daily intelligence brief. People like this. I'd Skype in, and I would just throw it up on the on the YouTube. It was called Dissident Thinker. It's still up there on YouTube. And then around 2015, I just said, like, I should just create a proper podcast. And I didn't know how to do any of this. I was just flying by the seat of my pants, and I just sort of figured it out over time with trial and error. And around 2015, 2016, Geopolitics and Empire was born. And it was always just moonlighting. I was teaching full time. And then it wasn't until 2021 when I finished, the whole COVID thing happened. And then my contract was up in 2021 with Kazakhstan. And then I just decided to try and focus full time on Geopolitics and Empire podcast. And then like March 2022, so that's like 10 months ago, almost coming on in a year. TNT Radio was born about a year ago. And so I guess they saw my work with Geopolitics and Empire, and they just offered me a full time gig at TNT. And I'm like,
I see.
okay,
So
okay.
the Geopolitics and Empire has been since 2012.
Yeah, not in that. I mean, that's like the genesis. 2012 was Dissident Thinker, and
Okay.
and then like 2015, 16 was Geopolitics and Empire, and I was just moonlighting, just like a hobby. And
Hmm.
now, I'm kind of trying to work full time on the Geopolitics and Empire, and doing TNT full time. So
Interesting. And so I imagine I almost want to talk about this early genesis of Geopolitics and Empire because this kind of brings back to I feel like the origins of this space are very interesting, and it's not often that we have the chance to sort of dig it up. So let's talk for a minute about that 2012 to 2016 period. Like, were you starting to get in touch with maybe like Doug Casey, Jim Rogers, or any kind of other top thinkers in the space, or what were you kind of doing during that period of time to how what was your creative process and sort of networking process as well?
yeah, Jim Rogers came later with Geopolitics and Empire, but I mean, early on, like I said, I wanted to talk to smart people because no one else around me wanted to talk about this stuff, and that was my, ticket to ride, so to speak. And so I sent out. I mean, people can go back to the archive, but I sent out to all these different people, ex CIA officers, Paul Craig Roberts and Lord Christopher Monckton out in the UK.
Hmm.
And you get one person, they say okay, and then another, and then you're like, wow, this person said okay, and then you do the interview with them, you Skype them in live, and they talk with you in the class. I figured out how to record the Skype and the audio. Some of them were poor quality initially, and then one thing leads to another. You start building your channel, which helps you get more guests, and then um, I interviewed Peter Dale Scott, who's like in his 90s now. He's a Berkeley professor, former Canadian diplomat. He's sort of like the father of the study of deep politics, the deep state stuff. And so, um, yeah. And then, like I said, I figured I don't know how long I'll be teaching. And it was getting cumbersome with the students because students just are kind of lazy and they don't want to participate. And I'm like, it's better I do this one to one. So I said, okay, I'm going to do my own podcast, and then later I had Jim Rogers on. He's big, and so that's my biggest interview on my YouTube channel. But my biggest interview got deleted. Back in January of 2020, I interviewed the author of the Bioweapons Act, the treaty that was signed into law in 1989 by George Bush, Francis Boyle. And I was the very first to contact him to get his thoughts on the whole COVID stuff. And his theory in January 2020 was that it
Hmm.
was that COVID was a bio, it came from the lab, and that got 300,000 views, and it would have had millions. I'm certain it would have had millions on
Yeah.
YouTube, and it would have the channel would have gotten much bigger. But they deleted it, and so what can you do?
Yeah, run us through one more time. Who have been sort of your biggest guests if people want to look it up? Jim Rogers is one of my biggest inspirations, so super jealous of that. Who are some of the other people? I know you kind of mentioned it a bit, but run it through one more time.
I mean, I like to look for obscure people, but I mean, I'm looking through the list now. I've had Pierce Corbyn recently. He's the brother of Jeremy Corbyn, the famous politician in Britain. Dr. Arian Hariati recently. He's also pretty well known. I recently interviewed a couple months back Thierry Baudet, who's a top Dutch politician of the Forum for Democracy. And he said something jokingly in the interview, and that got thrown around on national Dutch media. So my podcast with him was national Dutch news, and then even the Ron Paul Institute, Daniel McAdams, who does the show with Ron Paul daily, he messaged me. He listens to my podcast, and he was like, "That was a great interview with Terry." And then he tweets out on Ron Paul Institute. He's like, my podcast, the Geopolitics and Empire podcast, this is coming from Daniel McAdams and the Ron Paul Institute. He's like, this is where the real underground intellectual revolution takes place. Talk about my podcast. I was like floored. He's been a guest on my podcast as well. Martin Armstrong, he's pretty well known. He's been a guest. Just looking, Kim Iverson was a guest of mine. She covered my deplatforming from PayPal last year. Doomberg, he's well. Gonzalo Lira, who's out in Ukraine. Kurt Schlichter is famous in the conservative world. Sean Stone, Oliver Stone's son, was a guest. Just a lot of.
Wow, what does that guy do? Oliver Stone's son.
He makes documentaries. He's written book. He's got his own sort of channel going on, but he's kind of new agey right now. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like to look for obscure people. I've had this Bulgarian journalist Dilyana Gaitenzieva. She's covered the biolab stuff, and Ed Calderon, who's been on Joe Rogan. He's been a guest of mine.
That guy's cool. Yeah, you had him on.
Yeah, so
I listened to that Rogan one recently, actually.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I have a question that I was kind of saving. Now's a good a time as any. What's the secret to getting Jim Rogers on the podcast? Because I've seen like dozens of interviews with him over the years, and he'll often go on very obscure channels, like very just like really small channels, and I'm always floored and surprised that he accepts those interviews. And it's funny, he'll be like walking on a what's it called? Like he'll be on an exercise bike on the interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he seems to just accept like all the interviews, but at the same time I feel like he's kind of hard to get in touch with. So I'm curious, what was the story? How did that work out for you?
I mean, it's a while back, so I can't recall all the details. But there really is no magic or any secret sauce. The only thing I can tell you is just, I just blast out emails to whoever I can. I mean, the people that I'm interested in. I'm not. I'm not a narcissist. I blast out the people who I want to talk to, and it's usually the people who are not. If it's someone who's been doing the rounds, giving 20 interviews, I'm not interested in talking to them. They're just going to say the same thing I just listened to in the previous interview. So I try to find more obscure people. And so, I just sent Jim Rogers an email and shockingly got a surprise, a response, and okay. And that was it. No real special sauce there. And, if someone doesn't, I'll send an email once and then, wait a while. If I don't get a response and it's somebody that I particularly like, I might wait weeks, even months, and send a second email. And if they say yes. If they say no, after 2 times, I just give up because I'm not. I studied diplomacy. I was around fancy people. I feel we are all equal. I don't kiss anybody's butt. I'm not. I don't care who you are, how much money you got, your status. And so I just, once or twice, that's it. Okay, no, bye. I move on. And yeah, I just happened to get a response from Rogers. But something kind of strange happened afterwards. A couple of months later, I don't know if it was an error in the email system or someone was hacking the email. But I got a subsequent email. I think it ruined my relationship with Jim Rogers because I told him I was living in Kazakhstan at the time. And then I get an email from Jim Rogers like weeks or months later saying, I'm really keen on Kazakhstan. And then I thought, okay, I don't know. I mean, how do you respond to that? Like he's sending another email saying, I'm really keen on Kazakhstan. What am I supposed to say? And I respond saying, oh, well, I'm here in Kazakhstan. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know. And then he responds angrily saying, do you know who I am? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, you just told me you were keen on Kazakhstan. You know what I'm saying? Like something weird went on. And then he just kind of responded with an angry email. And so I haven't dared email him since. Maybe he's forgotten about it. I don't know, but he probably gets so many emails so many times. I would just say persistence. It's also the luck of the draw. Some people are at a bad time in their lives, or they're so busy, your email gets lost,
Hmm.
and then many months later or a year later, if you try again, it's like they'll respond right away. And so, yeah, that's sort of how it is.
Interesting. So doing it the old-fashioned way, emails. It's funny. I'd say almost 95% of our guests have come through Twitter, and almost everyone on the podcast knows someone else who's been on the podcast. So everyone's kind of vetted. Not that it's like a serious vetting process, but it's kind of like a bit of a, I don't know, just gives it like a bit of a club feel, I suppose.
Yeah, I have to go through Twitter sometimes. Sometimes there's people like, for the life of me, I'll spend an hour or two or whatever searching for their email or something. I'll go to their sometimes on their Facebook page, they've got their email, and then when I can't find it, their DMs are open on Twitter. Sometimes they're not, or sometimes I'll use somebody I know that I personally know that has interviewed them. I don't like to go. I don't like to ask people for what I'm saying, for email. So I try to avoid
Hmm.
that. But sometimes it makes sense. So yeah, sometimes I have to use Twitter DMs because that's the only way I can reach the person.
And I guess you just do a lot of interviews, right? Because geopolitics and empire, how many interviews or content you're pumping out, and then I don't even think we mentioned the TNT radio it's like 24/7, and I guess you do like a segment of that. That's like its own bag of worms. I want to hear how that works as well.
No, it's been insane. I mean, with the podcast before radio, it was as many as I can, like when I feel like it. It could have been zero a week or one or two or three a week. I think the most was like four or five per week with the podcast. But that's more like, because I mean, you're the boss, you can do whatever you feel like with the podcast. And with TNT initially, they gave me a daily 3 hour slot. So that's weekdays, three times five. So that's 15 guests per week. And each guest was pretty much like 50 minutes. And so it was nuts. And
And
it's
it's live.
live radio. And my first night doing the live radio, I got physically ill because I've always done pre-recorded. Like I said, I was introverted initially. I didn't want to do a podcast. I didn't want to become some YouTuber or become famous. I just want to know what's going on in the world. I want to know the truth. I want to know how things work. And the only way was talking to these smart people. I'm not looking out for fame or money. And so um, I got physically ill my first night in March 2022 doing the TNT show. After I finished the 3 hours, I had got like a headache and a fever. But then you just learn the ropes, and now it's easy. But then they knocked me down from 3 hours to 2 hours, which is much better. Ten guests a week now I'm doing, and so yeah, I do 10 guests. I try to get some regulars, like I got one or two or three regular weekly guests, and then you build out a contact list. And so, and I'm also, again, you spend a lot of most of the time is finding people. It's not doing the show, and so most of my time is spent researching good people, uh, figuring out where they're coming from really quickly, and then getting them on the show. Sometimes they've got books. I'll scan through them. Many of my
Hmm.
guests say they can't believe that I've actually read their books, because many people will just like get the guest on and talk about the book without reading it, and I really do try to read their books. And so yeah, it's like 10 a week on TNT, and then depending on what I have time for the podcast, like zero or one or two or three.
And what do you do if someone cancels on a live?
Well, with the podcast, it's pre-recorded, so not an issue. But with TNT, it's less common now. In the earlier days, it was more common, and so because it's TNT Radio, they got like their network, and so they could usually last minute find someone that's in their Rolodex or whatever to hop on, or it might be another presenter or show host, and then we could sort of banter for an hour, and so it's not so common these days, as TNT is getting in its groove and growing a bit. I mean, we've had so many, people on, a lot of, politicians, scientists. So yeah, we've had good names on, and so it's growing. It's still in its infancy, but it's trying to become financially sustainable.
And so, what if you can't get someone last minute? Do you just like freestyle it?
Well, they used to they used to just worst case scenario, they just hit a replay. There's I don't know how many of us. There's a number of because it's 24/7, as you said. We've got presenters. I'm a presenter. I'm down in Mexico. There's some that are in Europe, in the UK, others in Australia for the different time zones, and so they could just hit a replay of a previous episode, or yeah, as you said. The presenters we're following the news cycle daily, and so we can talk about I'm a news junkie because I've got a Telegram. It's almost 12,000 subscribers for my Geopolitics and Empire podcast Telegram, and my Twitter is like at 18,000. And so I'm. It's basically I curate my feed. It's what I'm looking at is what I'm posting to my feed, and so with that, there's a lot to talk about.
What is the logistics of a 24-hour show like TNT Radio? Like, if someone told me, just start doing a 24-hour show, I'd have no idea how to even set that up in terms of, I don't even know, the broadcasting and the splicing in the advertisements and all that stuff. Like, could you kind of walk us through a bit of the behind the scenes of how that works?
I mean, it's pretty crazy. I wouldn't know where to start either. And I honestly, I can't tell you so many of the details because I'm removed from that. Like I said, they're based in Australia. They've got initial funding to do all of this, and they've been doing, I think, a stand-up job so far. And like I said, I meet random people like Johnny Hoddle. That's not his real name, but he's British, and he's got his own staying. It's called the Staying Free podcast, and he just happened to move to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And I recently met him. I was in Vallarta, and then we both were in Morelia, Michoacan, at the Greater Reset, which took place during the Davos Great Reset. And he's been on TNT, and he's like, "Oh, I love TNT." And there's people all around the world who I think there's a former UK MEP who's got his own show. There was an Australian senator, Malcolm Roberts. Also, he had his own show on TNT. And so, um, basically, it's internet radio. So they've got their studio out in Australia. They've got like their studio technicians, the website, and then they've got to get on board a number of presenters, right, to cover all of the slots. That's us. I mean, everything gets. They've got something called like the Comrex or whatever, like the stuff that's used for live broadcast, and so the tech is in Australia. I connect to the channel, and then the guests can connect in various ways, right? And later the recordings get posted to the podcast platforms. Apple, all of the Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and we're taking donations. We've got merchandise. We've got live call in now, so people can call in live. We've got an interactive live chat, and so slowly it's growing. And I think they just got on board some. I don't watch TV or movies anymore. It's been years, but Nicola Carr or something. She was super famous in Australia on some TV show called Neighbors or something, and so she's got a TNT show, and so you build it slowly, word of mouth, organically. That's how I did my podcast as well, and so yeah.
Wow. And how did they approach you, and how did you kind of decide that this would be a good fit for you? Because it must be quite a commitment to be like, I will be live on the air 5 days a week.
Oh man, it is, and it's a pain in the butt. I just bought a Starlink RV, which covers all of Mexico. You can go in the mountains in the middle of nowhere in Mexico and have excellent internet, like 50 megs download, 30 or something upload anywhere in Mexico. So I bought that as a plan B. But I've been last year I went to Croatia for 3 months, and the show time in Mexico was like 6 p.m.,
Hmm.
which in Croatia, this is when I was doing 3 hours. In Croatia time, it was 1 to 4 in the morning. Think about that, 1 to 4 in the morning. And for 3 months, I had to do my show in Croatia from 1 to 4 in the morning, and then sleep till like noon, and then go to the beach. Uh, and so that sort of altered my schedule, and it also limited where I could travel to because I couldn't visit all of my cousins because you don't know if the internet's going to be, where you go, if you're going to have good internet to do your live show, or your car breaks down, or the bus breaks down, or you miss the flight. And so, I could ask for a vacation, but you don't want to do that too often. Um, but yeah, and it goes back to what I'm saying earlier. I take this stuff seriously. I'm a responsible person. I want to do the best that I can. I'm having the time of my life. It's You're getting paid to do what you love um to do, and so I'm just rolling with it. And like I said, they saw the work that I did with my podcast, and they offered me the gig, and I thought about it for a day. And because they pay me for it, with the podcast, like I said earlier, every time it's like rolling a rock, a stone up a mountain or a hill,
Mhm.
and you're building momentum. But the deep state, the military industrial complex, they knock you down. I opened my Patreon. I was slowly getting subscribers on Patreon. I get a message telling me that you need to delete these and these podcasts from the entire internet, or we will not unlock your Patreon. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to delete that stuff from the internet. Screw you guys. And they nuke my Patreon, one of my ways of monetizing the podcast. And then they deleted my most famous YouTube video. Then PayPal last year blocks me. And so it's each time I try to grow the podcast, they throw a spoke in my wheels. You know what I'm saying? And so TNT comes along, and so okay, for now I have um, some way to help out financially. And so meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out with the podcast. I opened up a membership option, and people still donate, and I'm getting sponsors. And so, you roll with the punches.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk more about the Matrix bringing you down. Like, is it typically just about the COVID type stuff, or are there other themes that are you're finding to be more challenging?
I mean, it's a number of issues. So one was definitely the COVID issue, because Patreon said, and it wasn't me, because I'm interviewing. We're just having conversations. We're not doing anything illegal. We're just having shooting the breeze like we are now. Online. Like, how is that illegal or violent or something? We're just chatting. And so one of the issues is the health stuff. So they would say, "Oh, what you were discussing or your guests was against CDC or WHO guidelines." So that's one big red line. And then another would be war. Uh, like I said, the Department of Homeland Security in April of last year rolled out the Disinformation Governance Board, if you recall. That failed, but they tried to roll this. It's basically the Orwellian Ministry of Truth. So that same week, they rolled out the Disinformation Governance Board. They banned Mint Press News from PayPal, Consortium News, and me, because of geopolitics and empire. What's the common theme with Mint Press News, Consortium News, and geopolitics and empire? It's war, and I mean anti-war, rhetoric, whether it's Ukraine or Syria or Libya or whatever. So war, especially, is another issue, and NATO is involved in that. NATO, um, the Atlantic Council, that sort of thing. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah, 2021, they Associated Press wrote that article in conjunction with NATO, and the year before, July of 2020, that same Associated Press journalist, David something is his name, contacted me. He wanted to interview me. He wanted to ask me about who I am, all these personal details about me. And I don't respond to my mainstream media, because I knew he was going to do a hit piece. So I was in Croatia at the time or somewhere, and I didn't respond. And sure enough, a few weeks later, when his next piece came out, it was attacking, quote, conspiracy theorists. And it's so predictable. And so yeah, it's the health issues, it's war, increasingly the climate, the climate change narrative. It hasn't been so hard yet, but that's coming. And then I think some of the LGBT stuff as well. Last week you had Jeremy McKenzie, who was a 14-year Canadian military veteran. He just got a call from Scotia Bank, um, telling them that they're canceling his account. He had 30 days to, figure his stuff out. He couldn't visit the branch of Scotiabank. He'd be arrested. And then no other bank in Canada will open an account for him. He's got 3 kids in the mortgage. For what? He's got a podcast as well, but he said some stupid things online. But it's basically the idea. It's my biggest concern is the algorithm ghetto. It's the Chinese style social credit system where I
Mm.
see it's coming to every country now. And if you don't do what the government says, and they have an increasingly longer list, so you might think now like, oh, I'm not, this or that, but tomorrow they're just going to keep adding stuff to the list, and if you don't do what they say, you can't buy or sell, you can't bank, you can't. I mean, you saw a little taste of it with COVID. Even in Mexico, you had like states like Tlaxcala, one of the smallest states in Mexico. They
Mhm.
passed statewide the COVID digital passports. So if you were not vaccinated, you could not go to the supermarket to buy food. You couldn't even go officially to the public park. I mean, of course, they couldn't police all of that. I guess they'd have like police check your papers at the public park in Tlaxcala in Mexico. But that's pretty crazy. Even in the state of Jalisco, where I am, Alfaro, this crazy governor, he proposed to enter and exit Jalisco. They wanted to check your vaccine status, your health status, and even to change the state constitution. It's illegal to mandate vaccines, and they were discussing to change the state constitution to make it legal to mandate. You know, so but the big picture here, today it's the health stuff. Tomorrow they can add whatever they want. I mean, even Samuel Garcia, the governor of Nuevo Leon, he tried to pass where if you insult him online, this was like a year or two ago, you get 36 hours jail in Nuevo Leon and a fine. And enough people pushed back that he removed that article, from the state constitution. And he recently went to one of the meetings, the climate UN meetings, and he said he wants to eliminate private vehicle use in Nuevo Leon. So yeah, I mean, this algorithm ghetto, this digital technocracy. That's my biggest sort of thing right now.
It's definitely scary. I saw one today. I shouldn't prod you too much with this because I'm gonna get you going. To, but I saw one today that was like, in China, you need to scan your face to take the bus and stuff like that, and all they have to do is say like, nope, you can't take the bus anymore. You know what I mean? It's very scary stuff.
I mean, look, when I was in Kazakhstan, we would often travel with students to model UNs and usually take the train, like from one city to what is it, Almaty or Astana, which was Nur Sultan, and then they changed it back to Astana. It's like a 15-20 hour train ride. And then we were heading back, and there was a guy in my cab. You share with, it's like 4 people to the train cab. And there was like a 50-something-year-old Kazakh, and he was taking like a 40 to 50 hour train ride. And we asked him, like, well, why don't you just take like a 1 hour flight? Because, maybe an overnight 15-hour train ride is okay, but to do like multiple, that's kind of crazy. Just fly. And he's like, I'm banned. The Kazakh government put him on a blacklist because he was like a workers' rights activist or something. So they put him on a blacklist. He couldn't fly anymore in Kazakhstan. And so, yeah, which is I'm seeing. See, this is the thing where you're seeing in China now and other places. You've got shops where you pay with facial recognition or your palm. And again, for me as a Christian, you think about the Book of Revelation. It's like you can't buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast on your forehead or your hand. So it doesn't have to be an actual implant because facial recognition is your forehead or your palm is your hand. And the idea is it's if you behave well, the social credit. So if you do whatever the government says, and in China, then if you disobey this or don't, or you do that, your social credit lowers to such a level where you can no longer buy a train ticket or bus ticket or enter into this. If there's no cash, see that's the biggest thing. If they remove cash, which more and more they are taking away, um, once they get rid of cash, you've got no option. And if you're in the cashless system, if you're blacklisted for whatever reason, you know You can't buy a plane ticket, you can't buy a train ticket, you can't travel, you can't work, you can't buy food, and so this is the direction we are headed towards.
Yeah, scary stuff. And so, with you having your PayPal canceled and your Patreon canceled, um, did that lead you to look for alternatives? And how did you fight the matrix, so to speak?
I mean, for now we have um, alternatives. The biggest problem it's caused me is just the issue of momentum because it takes time. I used a friend. He's got a side company of web developers, and so it takes a month to build out the website, to link it to PayPal and Stripe and stuff, and so you can come back, but then it just takes a lot of time and momentum, and so I use Subscribestar, which is the Patreon alternative. Stripe, I can still use Stripe instead of PayPal. So you still have stuff, but it costs a lot of. It's like you get knocked down the mountain, and then it takes
Mm,
a lot of energy and time. All right, to get back up again and get back up that mountain. That's the biggest thing. And a lot of the people who were subscribed on Patreon or PayPal, they kind of forget. They don't take the time to resubscribe on Subscribestar or
right.
Stripe. So that's the biggest thing. So for now, we have alternatives. Substack is really like the number one game in town right now. Substack. I mean, I'm planning to open one as well, but everyone's just Substack is the thing. I don't think it will always be the thing. Before it used to be like MySpace, which becomes Facebook. It's like a rotation, and now Substack is it. There's a lot of people having a lot of financial success using Substack, and so I did open the locals. People are having success with Rumble and a lot of these alternatives, and so yeah, for now it's okay. We've got alternatives, but I think over time, again, a lot of these windows will uh, be closing. But it's interesting times we live in, and my great grandfather in Croatia at the time it was the kingdom of the Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. He died during World War One. I mean, it's a crazy story. World War One ended. This is what I'm told by my mother. World War One ended, but because they didn't have WhatsApp or instant communications at the time, in that part of Croatia, they didn't get the news that World War One ended. So they kept fighting and firing, lobbing bombs, and the bomb fell into the courtyard of his home and killed my great grandfather. And then my grandfather was a Nazi prisoner. For 3 years, Croatia was under Nazi Croatian rule, and I guess my grandfather, he was a good man, honest man. He was a partisan, I guess, and so he survived for 6 months as a Nazi prisoner in the hole in the ground. And then my uncle, he's still alive. He fought in the Croatian War in Yugoslavia, and it's like every generation, every single generation, you're fighting evil. Umberto Eco, the Italian intellectual, he talks about ur-fascism, eternal fascism. Every generation has to fight against this evil, and some people they just shy away from it, and it's just like, nope, this is my experience. I can recognize tyranny, and so yeah.
Hey everybody, quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America, and Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. And has this forced you or made you sort of rethink uh, how aggressive you want to be with the content and sort of tone it down and make it a little bit more PG?
No, it's made me want to be more extreme because again, as a Christian, it's like you don't fear death, because if you believe in Christ and you're gonna go to heaven, your sins have been paid for, atoned, all that sort of stuff. It's like you have no fear. And I look to my forefathers, like my grandfather, who was a freaking Nazi prisoner. and it's like you stand against evil, and I don't have any fear. I mean, look, I live in narco. I mean, you're here in Mexico. Um, it's not the safest place. I had Duncan Tucker. He used to be a Guardian journalist. I invited him. He used to live in Guadalajara. He's now like head of Amnesty International in Mexico City. I invited him twice to guest lecture at my classes at the Tech. I remember one of the stories he investigated when he was living in Guadalajara. 30 minutes from my home, where I currently live, he investigated a house where they found barrels of acid, where criminals or narcos were dissolving
Hmm.
human remains. And so this is around. My home was broken into 3 times when I first came to Mexico. And so it's I've had a coworker who was kidnapped. Um, so it's like I've had students whose parents were kidnapped. I mean, they survived, but it's like this is the environment you live in. I'm not afraid. I just get more like, I think it's the valiant thing to do. The right thing to do is tell the truth, no matter the cost. Everyone's fighting their own battle, things that they're more passionate about. So it's not like I think everybody has to be doing this. It's whatever you're inspired to do. But I mean, at this point, I don't think it matters, because even if everything goes full totalitarian, even if I stop now, I'm already like on the list. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So it really doesn't make any point to shut up now, because even if things get full totalitarian, I'm going to be sent to the digital gulag or real gulag. So I might as well double down.
Yeah, I guess part of it is you're not afraid of the online stuff because you're already living on the edge in Mexico.
Yeah, even in Chicago, I mean, I haven't had a terrible experience in Mexico, but I was robbed at gunpoint. I was the manager of a supermarket, 5 blocks from my family's home. And I stared down the barrel of a gun. Three guys came into the shop. I was the manager. I had access to the safe. They stuck a gun in my face. They kept um, repeating. I don't feel comfortable saying it, but the N word, reference to black people. They kept saying, "If this moves, I'm gonna smoke his ass." They kept repeating that to me. Then they stuck the gun in my back and told me to open the safe. And they took like 5-6 grand in cash or whatever. And that was my first experience with staring down the barrel of a gun and being robbed and that sort of thing. And then later, when I was in Mongolia, I thought it was a good experience, because then it hardened me, because when I was in Mongolia, I was in Ulaanbaatar going for breakfast somewhere, and some Mongolian dude, he had a empty bottle of vodka, and as we were passing between two apartment complexes, he smashes the empty bottle against the wall, and all of a sudden, he's got a sharp object with which you could stab me or kill me, and he asks for money. And I'd studied Krav Maga a bit, and the philosophy is the path of least resistance. You want to get out of the situation first, as quickly as you can without violence. And so at that point, having been held up at gunpoint in Chicago previously, in Mongolia, I was not afraid anymore. And I was calculating in a split second all of my options. Do I fight this guy? Do I kick the bottle? What do I do? And then at the time, I was intermediate, so I could speak Mongolian. And then I realized he wanted some money, like a small amount of money. And I'm like, well, what if I just comply and give him the money? Which I did. It's like step by step. It's like kind of like game theory. And I gave him the money. He seemed pleased, content, and then I slowly walked away, and that was the end of it. Now imagine if I didn't give him the money, he could have started, lunging at me, stabbing me, and it could have turned out differently. And so, yeah, I think sometimes it's good to go through these tough experiences, because it really hardens you, and then in the future you can use that experience to your benefit.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about Mexico. Talk about Guadalajara, maybe different areas that you've lived. I guess you worked for the Tech Monterrey campus in Guadalajara, right?
Yeah, I'm still not far from it. That's like
Yeah.
well, they got two campuses, yeah, Santa Anita and then Guadalajara. Yeah.
But so that gig, I guess, wrapped up, but you've chosen to continue living in Guadalajara. Was just curious. Why Guadalajara? I mean, lots of listeners are curious about the city that haven't been yet. What do you like about Guadalajara? What keeps you there?
Well, I would leave. Actually, the plan was after Kazakhstan to go and live in Croatia, um, family, home. But because of the COVID stuff, I felt the danger was this digital technocracy that is coming, that came, and that is still coming, would hit the developed world first. U.S. and Europe, including Croatia. And some of my renowned guests confirmed that. Like I interviewed Jewish historian Edwin Black, who wrote the book on how IBM and the Nazis, worked together. IBM created the first paper computer to help the Nazis carry out the Holocaust. He said the same thing, And so I decided to flee back to Mexico to buy time because this sort of stuff would take longer to come to countries, developing countries like Mexico. And so I got my house here in Guadalajara, and my wife and the family. For now, she has a harder time leaving Guadalajara, so I'm kind of stuck here. But I am looking to get out to more rural areas of Jalisco. I just hate urban areas. I hate the city, so I'm not happy anymore living in Guadalajara because I hate cities and cars and urban. I mean, I like having a car, but in general, Guadalajara it's a nice place. I mean, it's the second biggest city in Mexico. The
Mhm.
population is like what, I don't know, 5 million or something. It's the Silicon Valley of Mexico. Um, there's a lot going on. You got Chapultepec, that's like the strip downtown where you got the cafes and bars and clubs, and culturally it's a nice place. And I
Mhm.
mean, there's a lot going on for Guadalajara. And you can't be surprised. You can for people, if you're a digital nomad, you can do your thing here. It's a low cost of living. I mean, in general, in Mexico, that's the thing I'm amazed about. My water bill is $50 a year. You know, electricity $5-10 a month. Internet, whatever, 20-30 bucks, and that's it. You don't have to pay for heating or cooling because it's so temperate, the weather, and the food isn't too expensive. I mean, things are getting more expensive, but what else can I tell you about Guadalajara? So culturally, oh, and like I worked for the tech. I had a pretty good deal for Mexico in terms of salary, and I know other people, foreigners as well as Mexicans, who have very well-paying jobs working for either Mexican corporations, businesses, or international, corporations that have a presence in Mexico. So I mean, you could get hired here and get a good, paying a
Mhm.
gig, or you can do your own thing remotely. And so, that's sort of a benefit. And then you've got Lake Chapala, which is an hour away. I think it's got the biggest number of expats, like Canadians and Americans, retirees, like 20 or 30,000 or something like that. And so, yeah,
Yep, down in Ajijic.
yeah,
That's cool. The thought of like moving to a rural area in Mexico. Um, I wouldn't mind discussing with this with you a little bit because it's something we hear very often from other podcast guests or just on Twitter or just other kind of like LATAM travel bros I talk to. They're like, oh, I can't wait to just like buy a farm and all that type of stuff. But it's really not the same to live in a rural area in Latin America as it is to live in a rural area in North America. And I think like it's challenging from both the infrastructure perspective and from a standing out perspective and a little bit of a danger perspective, and was just curious kind of if how far you've gone into that thought process. Maybe you've been looking at areas and if you know what I'm talking about.
yeah. I mean, it's a multitude of factors. I mean, like I already explained, my past experience. I mean, you can drop me off literally anywhere on the planet. I'd be happy to be there. I even thought about traveling to Antarctica, but then it's kind of hard to. There are not too many
I feel
options.
like that's kind of Disneyified though. You know what I mean? It's just cold but you got the parka and like you're kind of good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, but I like I said, I lived in the Gobi. Mongolia for me is like the edge of the planet, and then
Yeah, yeah,
Kazakhstan, and
yeah.
then from Croatia to Mexico to the U.S., and then I just love experiencing all these crazy things. And like I said, I'm happy to be alone, like with myself. I can read, I can entertain, I don't get bored in that sense. And then, so rural Mexico, I mean, it's a number of factors. First of all, there's a lot of people, like you said, they have this cartoonish sort of Disneyland film Hollywood vision of it. And when I was at the Greater Reset conference, 5 days in Morelia, a couple of weeks back, they talked about this. People building communities. They've got the success rate of a failure rate of a business. Businesses have like a 95% failure rate, and so do these communities that people put together. And because they start disagreeing over stupid things, so you've got to have a number of traits. Like one of them is that you're happy being in a place with low population density, like I am. You throw me in the Gobi for a year or whatever, I'm perfectly happy. So, you know what I'm saying? Like you're not going to miss McDonald's or Starbucks or hanging out with this or that person. So you have to be of that personality where you can be alone. And second of all, you can't be like that typical stupid American, which you should, in general, you shouldn't be like in Mexico. Where you always dress in shorts and you're loud, and you have to integrate with the locals, see how they behave on some level, mimic that behavior, speak Spanish, eat the local food. You get what I'm saying? Like integrate locally, and that's how I am as well. I learned Mongolian. I ate what the Mongols ate: camel and horse and camel milk and all of that. I love that stuff, and so so you have that sort of mentality, and then um, yeah, rurally, like I said, what's holding me back for now is my family, but I'm trying to work at it. And rurally, yeah, the further you go out rurally can be more dangerous because there's less law and order, which is more centered around the cities. So the further out you go, I guess you get more dangerous. Depends where you are, geographically in Mexico or whatever country. Um, so you have to think about that, because then if there's less police and law and order, increased chance, criminals or narcos can just raid your property, kill you, rob you, steal, rape your wife, whatever. And so, um, yeah, all these different things you have to think of. But I mean, I've consulted with people, and it's really what you're looking for. I mean, I've consulted with people because I've got a consultation option. If people want to talk about podcasting or expatriating or whatever, they can pay to chat with me. Um, and people from different parts of the world who are looking for different things. Some people want to be at the beach, like in Vallarta on the west coast, or on the east coast, like Cancun and Tulum. Others like Mexico City. Others like the Chapala area. Others like Chiapas, like near the jungle, or Oaxaca. More
Hmm.
temperate climates. And so uh, it really depends on many different personal uh, variables.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any? Have you thought about just going out to the coast, like going out to Vallarta or something?
Yeah, I mean, I've told my wife, like, since I can work online, we could be living at the beach, but it's a whole different ballgame when you got kids, and then you're raising your kids. Um, you need help from friends and family and different social networks. And so, something James Guzman spoke about at the Greater Reset at his talk. At some point, you got to start having roots. I know a lot of people who listen to My Latin Life. It's like you've got a great Telegram channel which I follow. Some of it doesn't apply to me anymore. But
Hmm.
when you're single and you're looking for women and stuff, that's a whole different ball game. But then at my age, you got kids, you got family, you're dedicated to your work, and I also happen to be a Christian. I attend the local church, and it's like um, this is kind of what you're focused on: raising kids in a healthy manner. And then your biggest network, my biggest network, is in Guadalajara. And so to go to like Vallarta or something, you're starting from scratch. So then
I
I
mean, it's
find it
still Jalisco though, but so there's
right.
some
Yeah, yeah.
overlap, but yeah,
Yeah, I get what
I
you're
know you
saying.
mean though. I know you mean too. Though, yeah,
Yeah, then I have to find a new church, build new relationships, because family helps with taking care of the kids when you got to go do some errand or something.
it's
You get what
true.
I'm saying, so
Hmm.
uh, yeah, but it's also hotter though, Vallarta. But yeah, I've been telling my wife, that's the cool thing with TNT. I was thinking of going to visit James out in San Miguel for a week. We get an Airbnb for a week. We just hang out, enjoy San Miguel. I do my TNT show in the evenings. Just I can take my Starlink if there's no internet, and so yeah, I can just we can sort of do that now. Go around Mexico. Um, so yeah, I mean, in the future, yeah, Vallarta might be an option or somewhere on the beach. And like I said, there's so many people in the alternative media, independent media. I mean, so many people moving down to Mexico. It's incredible. Like Daniel Estelin, former Russian FSB, he had his own show on Russia Today. He sold like 7 million books. He's down in Cancun. Josh Sigerson, World Alternative Media, is out in Vallarta. Derek Bros is in Morelia. I'm here. James is here. I mean, just so many people down in Mexico.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about the alternative media space. You kind of gave it to me as a potential theme for this conversation, and it's something that I'm not super familiar with. Like, what's sort of the landscape of what you're referring to as alternative media right now, and how do people sort of how does the audience discover this media, and then how does the hosts and the owners of these platforms, how do they sort of connect and form communities?
I mean, a lot. Some of the bigger names, like when it comes to alt media, is you've got like Alex Jones of Infowars in Texas. He was in the late '90s and in the early 2000s, really coming to prominence. And then like David Icke out in Britain, and it's not that I don't like David Icke. He says some things that I agree with, and then other things where he says he believes the elites are literally shape shifting lizards. It's like, sorry, no, yeah, the idea is you don't agree with everything. It's more nuanced, right? And so you pick and choose. And so you've got like the whole Infowars thing, and then David Icke, and then there's just a whole slew of.
Okay, that stuff's like very alternative.
Well, I mean, Infowars you'd be surprised. I mean, it's worldwide, very influential. I mean, in all different other parts of the world, Infowars has had a huge impact. And even David Icke now, he's banned from traveling to all of Europe, all of the Schengen countries, which is pretty insane. And they couldn't give a reason for it. Like one of my friends in Netherlands, who's a podcaster there, Rico Brouwers of the Podcars podcast, stand-up guy, he covered the trial that Icke had, I think earlier in January or December, and the Dutch court couldn't give a reason for not allowing him to enter Netherlands. I mean, this is the craziest thing. It's like the end of democracy, and so he can't travel anywhere in Europe. But yeah, I mean, alt media. You've got people that in alt media. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, that's one of the reasons they're deplatforming us because a lot of people are listening. I mean, I get surprised at the I get messages from people from all parts of the world, that listen to me, and it's just wow, I couldn't, you know, I had no idea. Like I said, I'm having lunch with some of my listeners in Croatia when I go there on vacation, or here in Mexico, or in the U.S., or with some of my guests. I get to meet them in real life, which is crazy, and um, yeah, I mean, and some of the people they're they use different platforms that they're big on, through Substack or their websites or a podcast, or they've got more bigger multimedia operations, or they're journalists. Like Whitney Webb is very well known. She's publishes books and like a blog, and then The Last American Vagabond is pretty well known. And so yeah, they use a hodgepodge of these different platforms, but we wouldn't be attacked by the Department of Homeland Security if we weren't having an effect, right? So
Jeez. So where do you find these people? Like, if I want to find the last of American Vagabond, what's the best way to do that?
yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like each it's sort of part of your journey, searching depending on the topics that you're interested in learning more about in politics or you mentioned Jim Rogers, and then you listen. I've interviewed Peter Schiff, I or Mark Faber, the Swiss
Hmm.
investor who lives out in Thailand, and so or Doug Casey, and so whatever sort of topics you're interested in. I use bookmarks. I just create like different folders, and I bookmark, or newsletters I subscribe. But you sort of there's no one place to list them all, and so you kind of just startup. You follow them. You end up following them on Twitter or Telegram. I'm a big fan of Telegram, so Twitter and Telegram and email lists or newsletters, and then I use a lot of bookmarks as well by topic to bookmark the different websites, and so you sort of put together your own dish, your own sort of custom dish of what you want to
Hmm.
consume.
And so in Guadalajara, you mentioned it's the Silicon Valley of Mexico. Tons of technology companies there, tons of business in general, really. Um, have you made any inroads into sort of connecting with people in the tech space in Guadalajara? Is that interesting to you as well?
When it comes to the tech space, well, not myself particular. Like I know people who work in different corporate areas. My friend, like I said, my friend, he used to teach with me at the tech. He doesn't teach anymore. He's an IT guy, and then he had a side business which he built the website uh,
Hmm.
for me. But like I'm doing my podcasting stuff, so I don't have much to do when it comes with the tech. But you've got a lot of startups doing interesting things here in Guadalajara. So I mean, anyone I'm looking actually to hire. I'm looking for an assistant, a full time assistant now to help me with my podcast. That's bilingual, that can do some of the tech stuff, and I'm going to be looking locally in Guadalajara. I think there's a huge pool, of talent, and so yeah, they've got these technology parks. I think they got a couple in Guadalajara. These technology parks. You've got is it Intel? I think they've got a Oracle and Intel. I had dinner at the home of the head of CEO, the head of Oracle in Mexico, because my wife used to work at the tech as well, and they had a lot of these overlapping projects between the tech companies and the tech contests and things. And so yeah, I mean, I met all. I just realized I was at the home of the head of Oracle Mexico here in Guadalajara, and so yeah, you've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've spent a fair amount of time in Guadalajara myself. I definitely enjoy it. Um, Definitely a hidden gem within Mexico, and being in Mexico City right now, I can tell you I prefer to be in Guadalajara because it's just sort of cheaper, less gringos. I feel like
Mhm.
more culture. Um, there's a lot of reasons I like it better. Just kind of feels more at home.
I mean, it's smaller, like you said. It's cheaper. Mexico City's huge. Guadalajara is much smaller. I mean, I was in Morelia recently. The little that I saw of Morelia didn't impress me. I thought Guadalajara was nicer, and you could go on the outskirts. I mean, there's a lot of just using that example of going to a rural area. Um, One of the things that inspired me, a friend of a friend, we went to visit their parents' home on the weekend, and they're about half hour outside of Guadalajara, half hour. So it's not like really that rural. You just get out of the city a bit, and it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's the thing about Mexico. Like, you don't have to go 2 or 3 or 4 hours to get really rural. You just get out of the city, and it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. And we went to their home, half hour outside of Guadalajara, and they got their own nice plot of land. They've got like a home built. They've got like chickens,
Hmm.
eggs. They've got avocado, black blueberries, corn, pineapples. They've got their own well. I mean, that's a great the end of the world as we know it. A scenario. You don't have to go full like into the boon, run for the hills. Half hour outside of Guadalajara, you got a well, you got chickens. You probably get whatever rabbits or whatever. They've got like fruits and vegetables. You're set, like easy. And so I thought that was pretty cool. They're sort of my model for that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've been in Guadalajara a long time now, like 5+ years, almost 10 years. Between a couple stays.
Yeah, it's been what? Well, minus Kazakhstan to be what 13, about a decade now, and I mean it gives you all of the amenities. you can pretty much live with most of the amenities you'd get like in the US. I look at my neighbors here. It's everyone's got good cars. Maybe that, you can, according to your taste, you can have whatever, five. I live in the middle class area, but 5 minutes down the street, you've got the multimillionaires who live in their high security gated communities with like big US style houses, and everyone's the streets are strewn with Amazon packages. Everyone's got their Amazon, their Netflix. You've got Domino's, Carl's Jr., Little Caesars, Starbucks, Costco, Walmart, Sam's. I mean, you name it. Supplements I order from iHerb without a problem. I get stuff here, and it's just like you've got everything you'd want in the US. Just for now, it's much cheaper, cost of living. And I mean, the US cost of living is pretty crazy for me. It's here, like, if I lose my TNT show, I mean, I can coast, for at least a year. I can like chill out and work part time or not even work if you don't, if you're smart about your finances, if you don't have debt. And so you couldn't do that in the US. You'd have to be scrambling, for work. And so yeah,
Mhm.
Guadalajara's nice, but there's a lot of places in Mexico that are nice up north. Baja, I like to make it out to Baja California, or people in Yucatan, Merida, Veracruz, Cancun. It'd be nice to make a venture down into Oaxaca or Chiapas, San Cristobal.
Mhm.
I mean, there's just so many parts of Mexico that are fascinating.
Mhm. One thing we do have to ask you about on this episode is becoming a Mexican citizen, because I think tons of our listeners are temporary residents, and we're all very hopeful to get our Mexican citizenship one day, but definitely a lot less anecdotes of people actually getting it. Not that it's difficult, just the fact that it's grown a lot in popularity to get the residency, and it kind of takes like 5 years to get the citizenship, or it could be less, obviously, if you have a kid or whatever in Mexico. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your process, your journey to Mexican citizenship. How was that for you? You must have been proud when the day came.
Yeah, I mean, there's basically I had two options. So, as you said, I think if you live basically for 5 years in Mexico, you get citizenship. Or if you marry a Mexican, after being married for 2 years
Hmm.
to a Mexican, you get a citizenship. So either way, 2 years married or 5 years living here. The residency is I don't think it's difficult to get. You get the temporary residency. Um, I think there's different variations where you get one temporary residency version where it allows you to work in Mexico, and another that doesn't allow you to work. I mean, if you're working remotely or whatever, then you don't need to be allowed to work in Mexico, right? So you can get the 1 year temporary residency, and I think it's just simply renewed for 4 years or whatever, and then you get your permanent residency, straight shot. Like, it's not difficult, and then eventually you can get your Mexican citizenship. And so, um, yeah, getting married or staying here for 5 years, and um, yeah, and once you become a citizen, I got my parents' permanent residency, and so yeah, once you become a citizen, I guess if you wanted, you could buy property on the coast without using, what do you call it, fideicomiso or trust. Um,
That's a good benefit of citizenship for sure.
yeah, and once you get residency or whatever, you can open bank accounts and you can come and go as you please. Even with permanent residency, you get for life; it doesn't expire. Um, Come and go, own property, open bank accounts, easy. And well, the thing with the naturalized Mexican citizen, they told me was, I thought this was interesting. I'm not allowed to run for certain political offices as a naturalized citizen.
Hmm.
And what did they say? If I'm not in Mexico for a period of 5 years at all, I could potentially lose my citizenship, which I thought was kind of shocking. Like, if I end up going to Croatia and for half a decade I never visit Mexico, they could maybe, in theory, take away my citizenship. And when I did the test, I mean, it was funny. I speak Spanish more or less fluently, of course, with some errors, but generally I speak Spanish. And they gave you a history test, 5 multiple choice questions at the time. I aced them all. I mean, I was teaching Mexican history at the Tec de Monterrey, so easy peasy. I joke with them. After I did I mean, they didn't even give me a language test. They saw I spoke Spanish. I did the 5 multiple choice history questions, and that was it. And I told them like, "What about the last test?" And they're looking at me, uh, bedazzled, like, where you put me in a room and I'm supposed to eat the habanero chile without breaking a sweat to prove that I'm Mexican. And they just laughed. But they did tell me this was 5 years ago when I got my naturalization that um, they were going to change the rules. I guess that's how it is now, where it wouldn't be 5 multiple choice questions anymore. It was going to be like an open essay. You'd have to read like 2 entire books on Mexican history and then write like, do this open test to get your citizenship. So it's like it might be harder for some people now, but it's well worth, like, even though I could have done the paperwork myself. I just hate paperwork. I paid someone. It's not really. At the end of the day, it's not that expensive. I paid a guy to help speed up, to do all the paperwork and appointments, and yeah, there's people that can sort of help you out with that.
Did you have to do the national anthem?
No, I didn't have to do the anthem.
Do you know it?
I think you caught me here. No, I don't know that. I mean, when at the Tec de Monterrey, every at least once a semester, we would all have to come out before the flag and sing the national anthem at the Tech. But it's been so long that no, I'm sorry. You got me there. I'm gonna have to go back and review the Mexican national anthem now.
Yeah, no worries. They kind of make fun of me and they say that that's like my final step is you got to do the Mexican national anthem, and then some states have like a state anthem as well. Like I know Veracruz has a state anthem, and probably some other ones.
Yeah, I mean, how many? Again, I'm sure you'd catch some Mexicans that don't know the anthem, but and I made again. You forget these things. When I was actively teaching the Mexican history, I knew a lot, and I would joke to the Mexican students, like, I know more Mexican history than you at the time, which was true. They knew very little. I'm like, everything from the past couple centuries of Mexico. Um, Now I was just losing. Yeah, I guess I lost my point there, but yeah.
Do you have a Do you have a particular favorite topic within Mexican history?
There's some fascinating stuff. I Skyped into my tech classroom Jefferson Morley. He's a journalist who deals a lot with the JFK stuff. He declassified the documents, which are available now at the National Security Archive, which is run by George Washington University. He wrote the book Our Man in Mexico. I highly recommend it, about how at least 3 Mexican presidents were CIA agents. It's not conspiracy theory. It's documented, declassified documents. Diaz Ordaz, I believe, Luis Echeverria, and I forget the other one. Like, it's in the time period of the 1950s and 60s. Their actual CIA code names. They were president of Mexico and CIA agents paid at the
Hmm.
same time, and they had code names Litempo, like Litempo 5, Litempo 6. And so again, for me, that's absolutely fascinating that you've got Mexican presidents who are CIA agents, and they're doing the bidding, of course, of the American Empire, of the U.S. And so, yeah, I mean, the 20th century is pretty fascinating when it comes to Mexican history.
Interesting. I did not think you would say 20th century. I thought you'd be more of like a I don't even know, like a earlier eras. But this I'm looking at this book. This is a very good pick. Hit us with some more picks for some more recommendations rather for Mexican history or other great
But
underrated books.
here's another one. It's called I haven't even read it yet. I've just scanned through it. I've had it for a couple of years on my bookshelf. You know how it is when you buy all these books. But this, what is it? Hold on, I got it here. The Secret War in Mexico, and so that sort of tells you more about the real Mexican history. You've got Alfredo Jalife. He's a left wing Mexican commentator, but he still says he does good analysis. Yeah, I don't know when it comes to Mexico. That's really what comes to mind. And another fascinating part for me is the North American Union idea. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people will say a conspiracy theory. I'm sorry, no, this is fact. You know, um, I've said the EU is the model for the rest of the world. It's the model, it's the blueprint for world government and for technocracy, and they want to replicate that to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You've had Robert Pastor, who was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He visited the tech frequently. I met him twice. He visited our campus twice, promoting the idea of the North American community, or basically North American Union. They call him the father of the North American Union. I had the last living interview with him, I believe. Actually, I used his textbook in my classrooms as a sign reading,
Mm-hmm.
and I interviewed him December 2013, and he passed January 2014 from cancer. And
Wow.
um, and recently you had AMLO, president of Mexico, last couple months ago. It's on Lopez Obrador's official government website. The transcript. He literally said, like 3 4 months ago, Lopez Obrador. He was in talks with Secretary of State Blinken that he wants to copy the European Union. I've been saying this for 20 years because once you understand, you read all of these boring white papers and you understand all of these, international relations, political science, globalist stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know their end game. And then you can just sort of track it. It's easy. You read the script, you know what's going to happen. And AMLO comes out, sure enough, 3 months ago saying, you know what? And this is not extrapolate. You can read the transcript. He said we want to copy the European Union and integrate Canada, USA, and Mexico. And then, literally a few weeks later, Rafael Correa, the ex-president of Ecuador, gives an interview and he says, "You know what? We want to copy the EU model for South America. We want to create a regional currency called the Sur, which Lula of Brazil is now. He just signed an agreement with Argentina. They want to create a Latin American Union
Mm-hmm.
with a common currency called the Sur.
Mm-hmm.
So you see what I'm saying? You've already got the African Union, you've got the Southeast Asian Union, and Putin and technically my former employer Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan. The Eurasian Union was Nazarbayev's idea from in 1994, and so you've got Putin and Nazarbayev pushing the Eurasian Union, and so again, for me, that's another fascinating part of history. And some people may have heard of Bilderberg. You've got since 1954 this annual meeting of elites called Bilderberg,
Mm-hmm.
and in 1980, some of their meeting minutes were leaked. You can find them on Public Intelligence or WikiLeaks. And the 1980 Bilderberg meeting discussed, so you can track it easily. 1980, they discussed creating a North American community. 1980. And then 1989, Canada and US create bilateral free trade agreement. 1994, Mexico joins to create NAFTA, right? Mexico, US, Canada, NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the 2000s, you've got like a prosperity partnership. They keep pushing this idea. And then now you've got NAFTA 2.0, USMCA agreement. And that's, I mean, that, and now guess why do you think they're going to have the next World Cup in North America? It's going to be in three countries: Canada, USA, and Mexico. Again, they're pushing culturally this idea of North America, and they used to have, like, you have the UN Model United Nations.
Yep.
For a time they used to have in U.S., Canada, and Mexico a North American uh, um, sort of like equivalent of Model United Nations. So this is the idea. So you got the Mexican CIA agent presidents, you've got the North American agenda, and so that's where sort of things are headed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm deeply interested in this idea as well of the North American Union. Do you think it's necessarily a bad idea?
Someone that again, a really famous person in alt media, G. Edward. G. Edward Griffin, who wrote Creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm aware of him.
Yeah, he took me out to lunch like 12 years ago. I used to be, that's a huge book, Creature from Jekyll Island. Ron
Mm-hmm.
Paul and others loved
Mm-hmm.
that. But Robert Kiyosaki, huge fan of Edward Griffin in that book. He's always talking about that book. Um, yeah, so he took me out to lunch, Edward Griffin, because I was a volunteer for his website. I happened to be passing through LA like in 2011, and then he's like, "Oh, let me take you out to lunch as a thanks for helping me out." And um, what was my point? You asked me. What did you? What was the last thing you
Is it
asked?
is it is it
Oh,
necessarily a
yeah,
bad thing, like
yeah,
further
yeah, yeah,
economic integration?
yeah. I'll take what J. Edward Griffin said at some years ago in one of his many documentaries or interviews. He said this idea of let's say world government or globalization or union or whatever. It's like anything, It's you take a butter knife. I always use this example with my classes or guns. I'm pro guns, pro firearms. I've got a license in the U.S. You could use the gun to protect yourself, to hunt for food, or murder someone. You can use the knife to spread butter onto your bread or stab someone. And it's the same idea. Like many things, platforms or technologies are neutral, but it's depending how they're used. So you could have a good world government or a bad world government. My idea is that the only time we'll have a good world government is when Christ comes back to reign, right? But given that man is evil by nature, in my view, and we've got these crazy globalists running around, like in some ways, the European Union has benefited, allowing people to travel, giving grants for certain stuff. But I feel like over time, like the long game, the mask will come off. You get what I'm saying? It's like it will over time become more tyrannical, and I feel like that's what we're seeing with the EU. Croatia just lost our kuna, our national currency, this month, and we
Hmm.
took the euro. And already, you're seeing it's becoming more expensive. Anytime a country takes on the euro and they drop their national currency, they lose their sovereignty. They Everything becomes more expensive, and then the EU puts all these more and more these crazy tyrannical rules. You had that German journalist Alina Lipp reporting from Ukraine, and just because she was reporting differently from Brussels, Washington's perspective, they froze her bank account and her mother and father's bank account. How is that? When it comes to Europe, EU, US, they talk about democracy and
And what
liberty.
what what country is this person from?
She's German, and
German.
she's living in Donbass or Ukraine, and just reporting differently on the news. But the fact that Germany turns off not only just her bank account for doing reporting, but her parents' bank account. So going back to North American Union, it would benefit initially a lot of lower people with the lower economic status. Um, but over time it would just tend to centralize power. So initially it would be nice, but over time it becomes just worse and worse. And you know what NAFTA did in the 90s? It got 2 million Mexican farmers from rural areas, and you can see the effects to this day. I see it on the street every day. 2 million Mexican farmers were put out of work because of the NAFTA rules, which decreased the price of corn. So it made it pointless for these Mexican farmers. It made it impossible for them to be farmers anymore because they dropped the price of corn so much. I think
Hmm.
intentionally to drive people from rural areas to the urban areas because you're more they can control the urban areas. And so now you see in Mexico people on at the street corners selling anything that they can sell to make a buck, to make a living, because they can no longer make a living in the rural areas. And I think that was intentional because they want to put us in these urban smart cities where they can control us,
Right.
and they don't.
Well, you know what? But like, so with the North America thing, with Canada, you have natural resources. With the U.S., you have just a developed financial system, and with Mexico, you have labor. So when you bring together resources, labor, and I guess human capital in the U.S., isn't that kind of good that you're kind of it sort of complements each other well, and then we combine, and then we're sort of this bigger body of around 500 million, and then we're much more competitive against Asia and other economic blocks.
No, I mean you're right. You're seeing a lot of nearshoring now back to Mexico. I mean, which is good. Automotive plants are being built. They're bringing back the semiconductor plants they're building in the U.S. I think they said that. What did they say? Mexico might be like 13% I don't know if it was auto manufacturing or semiconductors. I'm one of the two, but yeah, like you said initially. But my fear again is having a regional union. You are eradicating nationalism, national countries. That goes back to my thought with the national anthem. You were talking about Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, countries are like made up anyway, right?
Okay,
Because
well, yeah, yeah,
it's just interesting that wherever you're born, you have to learn that national anthem, but not any of the other national anthems of any of the other countries. Like, why do you have to learn this one, but not the other ones? You know what I mean? Or it's just like it's just, I'm sure you, if anyone, would just consider it just like a piece of propaganda, right?
I mean, in some ways, yes and no. Like I said, I identify proudly as a Croatian because that's my blood and my tribe that goes back many, many centuries. Um, but I was going to say that there's just so many things going on. I'm losing my train of thought. But uh, the idea is, well, my point was that during the pandemic, I realized that nation states don't exist anymore. And that's why now when we have like a national holiday, Mexican or Croatian or American, where you've got Mexicans or Croats bringing out the flag and singing patriotic songs, I'm sort of disdaining that now because the pandemic showed us that we're living now in world government. We don't have any more countries because all of the politicians of all countries are now following the lead of these supranational entities. So our countries don't exist anymore. So I cannot bear anymore to whip out my Croatian or Mexican flag and sing a patriotic song because we don't have anymore our own sovereignty or agency. Because my local retarded governor from Jalisco is doing, whatever the international corporations tell him to do, and so we don't have national sovereignty anymore. And so my point is that these regional unions, by de facto, they're supranational, and
Hmm.
it's basically world government. Because once you have these 10 or so regional unions, North American Union, South American Union,
Yep.
European Union, African Union. I
Yep.
believe the Abraham Accords are the way towards the Middle Eastern Union. I mean, you've got many articles going back talking about creating a Middle Eastern Union and Arab NATO and a common currency for the GCC countries. Like I said, Eurasian Union, Asia Pacific, and so that is then your foundation for world government. So I agree with you. Like in the near term, it's beneficial. And these are like the new rules of the game when it comes to
Hmm. There's the
globalization.
Arab League, by the way, already,
Yeah, that's
and then
that's one. Mhm.
there's the CARICOM as well in the Caribbean.
Yeah, those are all I think like iterations or attempts because sometimes not everything goes according to plan. They try with these different variations and one of them works, or they merge two of them together, and it's like an experiment.
Hmm. How do you think it's going to play out for the North America one? Because I guess that's in some ways the one you're closest to. You know, you're an American Mexican citizen. Do you think it's just like a slow path to like gradual integration and a bit more fluidity, or do you see something like more drastic, larger steps, or what are some of your takes on it?
Yeah, I don't have. I'm constantly trying to figure that out. I don't have an answer, but the EU took many decades to put together. It was financed. A lot of people don't know that the EU was financed by the CIA and the State Department. So, it was an American imperial project, the EU. That's documented again. But I think the game changer and everything that we're talking about, and some of my guests have confirmed this, that technology, technology can really accelerate a lot of things that are happening that they would take a much longer time, decades, even centuries in the past to happen. But with
Hmm.
technology, theoretically, I think a lot of things can happen quicker. But even still, like a North American Union, I mean, it would take time because you have to convince the population. The Mexicans, the U.S. Americans, and Canadians. Um, there's a lot of Americans who are very patriotic, U.S. Constitution and stuff that this won't fly with them. But there's talks again of a second U.S. Civil War. We see a lot of polarization, and the powers that be, they have a lot of pressure points. So you get the cartel, the drug trade. And I'm sure you're familiar with the idea that, CIA, the Mexican government and the CIA are involved, DEA, in the drug trade with the cartels. So they could, in other, look, the EU was created out of World War II, of a war scenario. You might not have, they could use a war in North America, or they could use the equivalent of a war would be like, war with the cartels. The cartels versus the Mexican government. They could move up into the U.S. and it could be declared a war, with the cartels. They could use that scenario to try and advance our North American Union, or it could just take many years, many decades. They are slowly progressing. It could be economic collapse. They could say all of a sudden, look, the economic system collapsed, and we need the Amero or the digital dollar or whatever. CBDCs are coming in, and so I think they've got different scenarios or pressure points that could work. But otherwise, yeah, it could take a while. Although technology, I think, could make it happen quicker than it did with the European Union.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I'm not totally against it. I feel like I feel like getting you talking about sort of like conspiracy theory stuff is definitely one of your
Facts,
what's the
though,
word,
conspiracy facts.
conspiracy facts. That's like one of your specialties, is just name dropping guys and being like this guy Robert Pastor, that guy. Da, da,
Well,
da.
I mean, I met. I mean, Robert Pastor's high level, official.
Mhm.
Like he was, he's not some. These are the real people. I like I said, I met a lot of these people in real life. So it's
No,
like,
no, it's true. I
yeah.
mean, I was just kind of looking at his Wikipedia quick. He was married to the daughter of uh, someone big. Sorry, I jumped off the page to something else, but um, and he had like a full. He went to Harvard and stuff. But yeah, yeah, kind of losing my train of thought here. But I mean, yeah, I wanted to. I'm sure a lot of our audience would have liked it, but I don't know. I try to run a clean ship, and it's tough for me as well. We don't. There are certain topics that I try to stay away from here. We just try to have
Mhm.
uh, we let the audience leave it up to their imagination and then go do their own research. Put it that way.
Yeah, I mean I mean I sort of do that on my podcast where I have people come on. I don't know, I frequently don't agree with everything my guests say. I'll usually agree with them on a certain point. I use the easiest, most recent example. I have a Canadian activist. Uh, I've interviewed him, and we agree on the anti-war stance, but then he's very much, on the climate narrative, which I disagree with. And he'll mention the climate thing in passing in the interview, and I'll just kind of ignore it, and I don't want to debate. So it's like, yeah, people. I feel listeners can figure things out on their own and come to their own personal conclusions. I'm not telling them what to believe. Take it or leave it. Take parts of it, discard
Hmm.
others. Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, I mean, this has been an awesome episode, man. Thank you so much for your time and telling us a little bit about your personal background and how you got to where you are, your life in Mexico, and I guess some themes that people can go take a look at, some books people can go take a look at as well. Everyone, of course, needs to go check out the Geopolitics and Empire podcast. You definitely have had an all-star lineup of guests over there. So I guess this is the point of the episode where you can kind of direct the audience to wherever you want to point them to next, the socials, etc.
Yeah, just the website geopoliticsandempire.com. Again, people may not know, if you type it into Google search. Again, I'm blacklisted on Google search. If you type in geopolitics and empire, almost nothing appears in Google search. How crazy is that? And so if you type it in on DuckDuckGo or any other search engine, all of my stuff pops up when you type in geopolitics and empire. So I didn't mention that even Google search has blacklisted me. Um, and I'm most active on my Twitter, the Geopolitics and Empire Twitter, or my Telegram. If you like Telegram, join me there. And yeah, people can donate. If you want to consult, if you want to chat about coming down to Mexico, expatriating, conspiracies, or podcasting, you can purchase chat with me. Or my TNT radio show is over at tntradio.live. You can find my presenter page over there. And I enjoyed the work you're doing at My Latin Life. I'm frequently, checking your feed and retweeting from time to time. And so, you're doing good work as well.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate that. And guys, I mean, the Geopolitics and Empire is big. I mean, 25,000 subscribers on YouTube, just shy of 18,000 on Twitter, and all that despite the Matrix trying to take them down. Pronouncing your name again, Hrvoje. Shit. What was? I'm gonna cut this.
You started well, but you ended it. No, it's all right. Hrvoje Moric. Kind of like Luka, the football player, Luka Modric without the D, Moric.
Oh my God, I'm gonna have to cut that so I don't look like an idiot. Guys, Geopolitics and Empire on Twitter at geopolitics_EMP. Go check it out. Go subscribe. YouTube, Twitter, all the other platforms. Any final words?
Yeah, if anyone is passing through Guadalajara, drop me a line. I'm happy to meet for a coffee or a tequila. So happy to meet with people and have a chat. And so, otherwise, keep your noses clean and be careful. Stay frosty, as they say.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try to make that happen because I know if we bust up the tequila, we would have a hell of a conversation. So we'll have to make that happen in the future.
Just not recorded, yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Thanks again. This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Geopolitics and Empire. Hrvoje Moric. If I'm saying that all right. Thanks again for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Be seeing you.
Absolutely.